You stopped texting back, not because you don't care, not because something terrible happened, not because you've decided to disappear from your own life. You stopped texting back because somewhere between the last 3 conversations you had to perform and the next 3, you could already feel coming. Something quietly closed inside you. Maybe you've been calling it ghosting. Maybe you've been calling it a bad week. Maybe you've been calling it depression, avoidance, being terrible at communication, or just not being a people person. But what if none of those labels are quite right? What if what you're actually experiencing has a name, and that name isn't a flaw? Here's what culture says about someone who withdraws from social life without warning. It says they're depressed. It says they're avoidant. It says they're difficult, unreliable, a bad friend, someone who needs to push themselves harder and get outside their comfort zone. But psychology observed something different. You feel the pull to disappear because some nervous systems genuinely experience relentless social demand the way other people experience physical pain. That isn't weakness. What looks like withdrawal from the outside is the body drawing a boundary the mind was too exhausted to draw with words. There's a specific kind of tired that doesn't come from work or illness or not sleeping enough. It comes from a conversation you couldn't end, from a social event you performed your way through, from smiling at exactly the right moment, laughing when expected, offering the correct response to someone else's emotional weather, while something inside you sat in a waiting room, patient and silent, counting the minutes until you were finally allowed to go home. The body remembers all of it. The slight tightness in the chest during small talk you didn't want, the shallow breath in loud rooms, the specific fatigue that settles into your jaw, your shoulders, your hands. From holding yourself in a shape that wasn't yours for a few hours too long. That isn't anxiety, that isn't shyness, that is social overstimulation, and it has a cost that compounds quietly over time. This pattern didn't appear out of nowhere. Most people who experience socially selective burnout spent years, often childhood and all of early adulthood, doing the opposite of what their nervous system needed. They went to every birthday party, even when the noise made their skull feel 3 sizes too small. They stayed in social situations long past the point of comfort, because leaving felt like an admission of something. They learned to read every room, whose mood was shifting, who needed managing, where the unspoken tension lived, because being attuned felt safer than being caught off guard. They became exquisitely skilled at social performance, and that skill cost them more than they ever told anyone. Because here is the thing about people who are good at reading rooms. They cannot stop doing it. The skill doesn't switch off when they want it to. Every social interaction, even joyful ones, even ones they chose, activates the same vigilant processing. And vigilance, sustained over decades, is exhausting in a way that no amount of sleep fully repairs. This is where the ghosting begins. Not in malice, not in indifference, but in a nervous system that finally, quietly, without announcement, runs out of capacity. You feel the need to disappear from your social world because Eisenberger and Lieberman, neuroscientists at UCLA, witnessed in brain scans what you felt your entire life, that for some nervous systems, too much social demand doesn't feel like inconvenience. It registers as pain, not metaphorical pain, neurological pain, in the same circuits that process physical injury. This is why you cannot simply decide to be less affected. You cannot reason your way out of a threat response any more than you could think your way through a sprained ankle. The sensitivity isn't a mindset, it is a wiring pattern. And behind all of it, there is something quieter, Something most people with social burnout have never said to another person because they're afraid of what saying it out loud means. They're tired of performing care they genuinely feel, not fake care, real care for real people they actually love, but care that has to be packaged a certain way, expressed at the right volume, demonstrated on the right timeline, or it doesn't count. Care that has to prove itself through presence, even when presence is the one thing the nervous system can no longer sustain. Behind every unreturned message is a quiet voice that says, "I do care about you. I just have nothing left to give the performance of caring about you right now." And that distinction between the genuine feeling and the performed expression of it is one of the loneliest places a person can live. Here is the counterintuitive truth that most mental health content will not tell you. For a specific type of nervous system, one that processes social information deeply, carries emotional data from interactions for hours afterward, and has a genuinely limited capacity for sustained external engagement. Withdrawal may not be the symptom of something going wrong. It may be the survival mechanism of something going right. Not the withdrawal as a permanent state, not the ghosting as a final answer, but the impulse behind it, the deep, bone-level pull towards silence and recovery. That impulse is not pathology. Psychiatry has a long history of labeling introverted, highly sensitive withdrawal as depression, avoidant personality, social anxiety, or attachment disorder, and sometimes those labels are accurate. But sometimes, for a certain kind of person, under a certain kind of social load, the withdrawal is something else entirely. It is the nervous system attempting to protect the very thing that makes connection possible in the first place, genuine presence. Because a person who pushes through social burnout indefinitely doesn't become more connected. They become a better performer of connection. Hollowed out, increasingly absent, even when present, eventually resentful of the very people they were trying to stay close to. The withdrawal, when it comes from this place, is not selfishness. It is the quiet wisdom of a system that knows it cannot give what it does not have. When that understanding lands, when the shame around needing significant recovery time begins to loosen, something shifts, not in the behaviour. The behaviour often stays largely the same. What changes is the relationship to the behaviour. The text doesn't get answered any faster, but it stops feeling like evidence of a broken character. It starts feeling like an accurate report from a nervous system, doing its best under conditions it was never designed to sustain indefinitely. And that shift, from self-condemnation to self-recognition, creates a kind of space where the question changes. Not what is wrong with me that I keep retreating, but what would it mean to build a life that doesn't require me to deplete myself to prove I belong in it? You stop texting back, and maybe that wasn't failure. Maybe it was your nervous system finally telling you what it has been trying to say for years. That the version of you who could show up for everyone all the time, without cost, without limit, without rest, that version was never real. It was a performance, exquisitely maintained, genuinely well-intentioned, and quietly unsustainable. The real version needs silence to come back to itself, needs space between people to remember why people matter, needs the room to be empty before it can genuinely want to fill it again. That is not antisocial. That is not depression. That is not something that needs fixing. That is a nervous system that learned, the hard way, over a long time, that it cannot pour from an empty vessel, and it is asking, perhaps for the first time, to be believed. Not absent, recovering, not cold, protecting warmth, not broken, wired differently, not a bad friend, someone whose friendship costs something real, and who is finally starting to believe that cost is worth paying. You are allowed to need more quiet than most. That has always been true. So here is the question I want to leave you with. Drop it in the comments if it resonates. Is there someone in your life you genuinely love, but have quietly stopped having the energy to perform for? Not because the love is gone, but because the performance of it has become more than your nervous system can carry right now. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to justify it. Just, if that's where you are, I'd like to know. Because I think more people are living inside that sentence than anyone is saying out loud.